Okay, I think we'll get started here. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's workgroup meeting. I'm Jason Crow, and I'm the lead staff on the heavy duty investment strategy here at CARB. Today, I'm joined by a number of other CARB staff, as well as staff from CalSTART and the California Energy Commission. And we'll have folks introduce themselves as we go along through the meeting here. There is a copy of today's agenda available online, along with one handout that we'll be discussing later in the meeting during the school bus update. Before we get underway, just a little information on workgroup logistics. Throughout the workgroup meeting, we will pause for questions. At that time, we'll ask that you raise your hand to let us know that you'd like to ask a question or make a comment. CARB staff will then unmute your line. And for those of you who are participating by phone, you'll need to press #2 to raise your hand. And you can also ask questions in the Q&A box. We'll remind you of these instructions throughout the meeting, and we do appreciate your patience in case we run into any technical difficulties. Also, just to note, we are recording today's meeting, and we will have a recording that should be available on our website in about 2 weeks. Okay, I'm going to start with some background on the heavy duty investment strategy. Each year, the heavy duty investment strategy is updated as part of the annual funding plan for low carbon transportation and air quality improvement program, or AQIP investments. The strategy acts as a roadmap showing how CARB will invest its low carbon transportation funding on a combination of transformational technologies for heavy-duty vehicles, off-road equipment, and fueling infrastructure, with a focus on moving technologies through the commercialization process and meeting emerging market demand. The heavy-duty investment strategy serves as CARB's long-term investment strategy for low-carbon transportation and AQIP funds. It does cover 3 years of funding. It includes an assessment of the projected funding needs for each of those 3 years in the plan and provides high-level guidance for our heavy-duty funding. It describes CARB's larger portfolio of transportation incentive funding and the role of investments in furthering the demonstration and deployment of heavy-duty technologies. And it also includes an annual report on the current status of the state's school bus fleet. All right, for this year, the governor's proposed fiscal year 2022-23 budget includes $918 million for heavy-duty vehicle and equipment projects. This funding includes $600 million for low-carbon transportation through the cap and trade auction proceeds, $290 million from the state's general fund, and a little over $28 million from the air quality improvement program. At our March 22nd workgroup meeting, staff requested some input on preliminary ranges for allocations for the heavy-duty incentives, and these are shown on the attachment for that meeting on our website. Final recommendations will be developed with public input and presented for the board approval in the funding plan. We're also going to provide some brief updates today on heavy-duty vehicle and equipment, on the heavy-duty vehicle and equipment industry, CARB's funding plan process for this year, HVIP, CORE, Energized, and the Innovative Small E-Fleets program. And so first up, I'd like to introduce Kevin Wakowitz from CalSTART with a few industry updates. Kevin?
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it. Looking forward to talking about these new updates. Sorry, having a screen problem here a minute. Looking forward to really being able to talk about some of these updates. You know, we're always trying to keep our finger on the pulse of the industry and hopefully help inform this investment strategy. While I was kind of pulling these things together, one thing that was obvious, we're definitely at a key point in time for the zero emission, medium and heavy duty vehicle industry. We're seeing many new products being offered by the OEMs, many more moving from the demo and pilot stage and into mainstream production, all with some serious manufacturing capabilities being added to the market. The ability to really ramp up production of these applications is critical, and it's a solid stepping stone to seeing a fully developed market including supply chain, training, infrastructure, and other elements needed to meet our zero-emission commercial vehicle goals in the medium and heavy-duty markets, where we want to try to achieve 100% sales by 2040. Starting with some key components in technology, first thing I'd like to point out is the kind of the obvious need and recent investments for low-cost US-made batteries for medium and heavy-duty vehicles. The commercial vehicle industry has typically lagged behind the light-duty markets with respect to cost and availability, and most medium and heavy-duty OEMs haven't really been able to realize the price points needed to get some of our larger truck applications down to cost parity with the conventional vehicles quickly enough. But encouragingly, we've seen some pretty large investments made by some of the light-duty manufacturers, and hope some of these investments will quickly benefit some of the medium-duty products hitting the market. The recent announcements around GM's Ultium battery investments and Ford's manufacturing capacity investments will hopefully help drive lower costs in the 2B and the Class 3 delivery van market. Other manufacturers like Proterra are expanding their supply chains of commercial vehicle batteries and offering their products to the market and other vehicle OEMs. The California governor's budget that you just mentioned for this year also proposed a significant investment in Lithium Valley, which will hopefully bring low-cost battery manufacturing and supply chains to California. The US DOE has announced significant investments in battery manufacturing as well. So it's really great to see some additional US manufacturing capacities being added to the market, and will hopefully help drive lower costs and accelerate the market for battery electric vehicles. To charge these batteries, we've seen a lot of investment as well in new higher power and innovative charging strategies, which will be critical to help expand the range and functionality of a lot of different truck applications. And hopefully we'll see more of these high power capabilities coming to public stations along key corridors, which is something that's been talked about quite a bit in the last few months. And developing these corridors is a key step to connect hubs and regions with zero emission longer haul freight vehicles, and really a kind of a key market enabler overall. The new federal IIJA infrastructure bill has some significant funding available to help build out these corridors for both light duty and for medium and heavy duty commercial vehicles. The recent announcement by Daimler Truck, NextEra Energy, and BlackRock Renewable Power to invest over $650 million to build and charge refueling corridors for electric and fuel cell trucks shows a really strong market potential for these longer haul trucks. The recent CEC RETA award to EPRI, of which I'll admit CalSTART is a major partner in, will help develop and test and deploy megawatt charging systems for medium and heavy duty vehicles. The Charin megawatt charging connector work has now been picked up by SAE, where a new connector standard, now known as J3271, for those of you who keep track of that, will be developed and available for use by the industry, hopefully in the next year or two. Many charging equipment providers are also looking to offer higher and higher power charging systems to charge these trucks. So it's only a matter of time before we start to see these quick on-road charging capabilities out in the real world. Vehicle manufacturers are also working on onboard systems to utilize and leverage these new charging capabilities. From the DOE SuperTruck 3 award announcement in November, we saw both PACCAR and Volvo awarded funding to develop megawatt charging systems for their Class 8 trucks. So really exciting developments on the battery and the charging side of things. But last year wasn't just battery electric. We saw a lot of significant movement on the hydrogen fuel cell side of things. We saw some really great investments and announcements from some major OEMs to develop new hydrogen fuel cell trucks, and also saw some announcements on expanded demos and pilots of these trucks in California. The CARB CECs and their support of the NorCal drayage project in and around Oakland will deploy 30 Hyundai fuel cell trucks starting in early 2023. And as part of the DOE SuperTruck 3 program award, we also saw awards to Daimler Trucks, Ford, and GM, all funded to develop fuel cell trucks. As part of those awards, Daimler Truck will develop a Class 8 tractor, but even more surprising was the announcement that Ford is going to be developing a Class 6 vehicle based on their Super Duty chassis. So a Class 6 hydrogen truck, which is very exciting and a new market opportunity, I think. A Nikola fuel cell truck delivered beer to the Super Bowl. Hino and Toyota are working on their new products, and Hyzon is also working to bring their European fuel cell truck to the US shortly. So lots of great action on the zero emission truck side of things, including both battery electric and fuel cell trucks right now. Kind of looking at the bigger picture, our team at CalStart's been busy tallying up total numbers of deployments and orders for zero emission commercial trucks in the US. Latest count was that so far since 2011, we've deployed about 1,200 commercial vehicles in the US. That doesn't count the hundreds of trucks on order and yet to be delivered, nor does it count the thousands of new trucks that were just requested through HVIP this year, which you'll hear about in a few more minutes from Andrew Morgan from CARB. And that number this year, I think, is going to be more than double the number of trucks that we saw requested in HVIP in 2021. This is significant. I wanted to mention it because I think, these are commercially, the HVIP orders are for commercially available trucks and represent solid purchase orders. So there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of new models out there. Our zero emission truck inventory tool, or ZETI, has now listed over 120 different medium and heavy duty truck models available in the US and Canada in 2021, and more are coming in 2022 and 2023. We're hoping that fleets and operators will have plenty of options to choose from. We're also seeing a lot of new innovative, new financing and operational models enter the market this year, and you'll hear a little bit more about the ICEF program in a few minutes from Nick Yokuk and see what is planned to help smaller fleet operators who might not have access or the means to charging infrastructure, nor the upfront capital for these purchases. Companies like Zine, WattEV, and a few others are offering new transportation as a service models to help speed the adoption of these zero emission trucks. Kind of on the vehicle market development side, probably the two biggest movers in the market were Class 2B and Class 3 local delivery vans, as well as the Class 8 drayage and regional haul offerings from a range of OEMs. CARB, which you may hear about later, set an ambitious goal with their Project 800 drayage truck effort, with the goal of seeing orders for at least 800 drayage trucks in 2021. They just nearly met this goal by the end of the year, and I think have surely blown through that number after the latest HVIP funding that happened about 2 weeks ago. So great to see so many of these trucks being ordered, and really a good head start on the upcoming ACT and potential ACF rule in California, which will drive cumulative demand to nearly 10,000 vehicle sales by 2025. BYD, Freightliner, Kenworth, Peterbilt, Lion, Nikola, and Volvo now all have Class 8 drayage trucks available for sale in California, with more on the way. Longer range, lower price, more competitively priced trucks are in the pipeline. And kind of looking at it with a little bit of a global lens, Scania, recently announced longer range capable trucks in Europe by 2023. And they're also probably going to leverage the recently announced Traton, Volvo, Daimler joint venture announcement to build charging corridors in Europe. So very exciting over there, and hopefully a lot of that technology and momentum will quickly come here to the US. Even more interesting, not too surprising, is the last mile delivery market. With the huge increases in e-commerce and last mile delivery needs, we've seen some really great offerings from not only the EV only startups, but as well as some established OEMs. GM and their EV600, leveraging the Ultium battery and drive system, has begun delivering vans to some major customers, and Ford has also started delivering their e-transit vans as well. The F-150 Lightning with the Ford Pro package is being marketed to commercial fleets with some significant off-board power capabilities for lots of different types of truck applications. So exciting to see that kind of come into the market as well. Other manufacturers such as Envirotech, Freightliner Custom Chassis, Green Power Motors, Lightning E-Motors, Motive, Sea Electric, Workhorse, and Exos all have delivery vans available now for sale and in the HVIP catalog. So really exciting to see those markets accelerate so quickly. Wanted to mention quickly off-road as well. The core program, which you'll hear Jacob Whitson talk about in a few minutes, will include new equipment categories for zero-emission construction equipment and ag equipment. These markets are emerging, and new models are currently becoming more available in smaller offerings, such as small excavators, skid steer loaders, and ag tractors. Established names like Bobcat and Volvo are now offering products, as well as newcomers from Monarch, Hummingbird, Selectrac, and are offering some of the ag tractors that are needed out there. So the new developments in these markets is significant. We'll look to these targets to ramp up and try to meet the California ACT targets, which are, as most everyone on this call knows, we've seen 16 other states sign on to an MOU to adopt California's rule. And the big news really in the last 6 months or so is that 5 additional states have now actually passed legislation to enact ACT, with more expected in 2022. So lots of demand, lots of offerings out there, and lots of great new market developments. So again, a very pivotal time in the commercial vehicle market, and more to come shortly. So Jason, with that, I'll pass it back to you, and we can talk about all the other great new programs out there.
Thank you, Kevin. That's a great update and overview. There's quite a bit going on in the heavy duty vehicle and equipment space. So stay tuned for more. All right, I just have a few updates on kind of what's going on with our overall funding plan process, what's coming up, and what's expected to happen this year in terms of timelines and activities. We do have a second work group meeting planned for the heavy duty investment strategy that is right now planned for May 25th. And we have some other heavy duty work group meetings tentatively planned for May 3rd. That will include one on our clean off-road equipment program in the morning and one on HVIP in the afternoon. On May 4th, we have a work group meeting planned on truck loans and the new zero emission loan pilot program. And then on May 10th, we have a second core implementation work group planned as well. On the overall funding plan itself, we held an initial workshop on March 15th, and the next workshop is tentatively scheduled for July 21st. We're planning to post a draft funding plan document sometime in the early July timeframe. And then the final draft funding plan is expected to be available for review in early October, with the funding plan going to our board in November. Those are tentative planned meeting dates and times, so those could still change, but we think most of these are going to move forward. All right, that's kind of the overall funding plan schedule and timeline in a nutshell there. And now I want to turn to Andrea Morgan to provide an update on what's happening with HVIP. Andrea?
Thanks, Jason. So as Jason mentioned, I'm Andrea Morgan, and I'm the lead staff for HVIP policy at CARB. And it's been a big couple of weeks for our Clean Truck and Bus Voucher Incentive Project, which is better known as HVIP. So on March 30th, the HVIP successfully reopened to new voucher requests after having been closed since October 2021. And in total, $272 million was requested within the first 24 hours of HVIP reopening, showcasing the huge demand for zero emission technologies. HVIP, the good news is HVIP remains open to additional voucher requests, including HVIP standard funds and set-asides for transit and school buses. And while the funds specifically set aside for drayage trucks have been fully subscribed, requests for drayage and Class 8 tractors will continue to be accepted and funded out of HVIP standard funds. So in terms of more details, the team is in the process of reviewing voucher requests and will be notifying dealers and purchasers as funding has been set aside for their request and following up with any additional information that we need. We are still conducting reviews of voucher requests and QAing and QCing data. So we don't have detailed statistics yet to share about reopening. But as Jason mentioned, we are planning an HVIP focus work group for May 3rd. And at that time, we'll share additional statistics from HVIP's reopening, as well as discuss policy changes under consideration for the upcoming fiscal year. So I'd encourage everyone to keep an eye out for a Gov delivery notice with additional details about that meeting. So now I'll turn it over to Jacob to provide a brief update on CORE. Jacob.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you. Let me get back to my screen here. So my name is Jacob Whitson. I'm the lead project manager over the CORE project at CalSTART. CalSTART's the project administrator of the Clean Off-Road Voucher Incentive project, also known as CORE. And today I'm going to be providing a brief overview of the CORE project. So CORE is intended to accelerate deployment of zero-emission technologies in the off-road sector by providing a streamlined way for fleets to access funding that helps offset the incremental costs of this technology. CORE currently includes equipment categories such as airport cargo loaders, cargo handling equipment, forklifts, MPUs and GPUs, rail car movers, RTG cranes, shore power cable systems, terminal tractors, TRUs or transport refrigeration units, and other aircraft, tug and airport ground support equipment. So CORE provides vouchers to California purchasers and lessees of zero-emission off-road equipment on a first-come, first-served basis with increased incentives for equipment located in disadvantaged communities. CORE has been allocated approximately $239 million since the project's inception, dating back to fiscal year 17-18. And CORE established a first-come, first-served voucher program for zero-emission off-road freight equipment that launched in 2020. During that offering, approximately 500 vouchers had been received and funded, totaling approximately $74 million. CORE also provides voucher enhancements or plus-ups, as we refer to them, for projects deployed in disadvantaged communities and additional funding for needed infrastructure as well. There currently are 13 manufacturers that have eligible equipment models in the CORE catalog. Those include terminal tractors, forklifts, transport refrigeration units, mobile power units, and rail car movers. Those 13 manufacturers have a total of 57 different eligible equipment models and configurations in the CORE catalog. Currently, fiscal year 21-22 allocated $194.95 million of funding, which brought on new exciting opportunities and flexibility to fund equipment beyond off-road freight. CORE will include new heavy-duty off-road equipment categories, such as agriculture, construction, switcher locomotives, and hovercraft. CARB staff have held several work groups over the last few months to solicit feedback from stakeholders on how to improve access and priority for small businesses, category funding caps, voucher amounts, purchaser and dealer terms and conditions, equipment eligibility criteria, and much more. The comments gathered from stakeholders over the last several months is currently being considered, and an amended implementation manual will soon be released, and the CORE project will start accepting vouchers for freight and heavy duty off-road equipment categories this summer of 2022. Building on the success of CORE and to fulfill the directives set forth in SB 170, however, this category is not off-road or heavy duty, it is in the CORE program. Small off-road landscaping equipment for small landscaping businesses and sole proprietors will be included in the CORE project. Eligible purchasers will have access to $30 million to purchase zero-emission small off-road equipment, such as leaf blowers, lawnmowers, and string trimmers. This equipment category is currently being developed in consultation with air districts and other interested stakeholders, and public work groups will soon be underway in the coming months to solicit feedback from equipment dealers, manufacturers, purchasers, and community groups, and any other interested stakeholders. So I encourage you to register at californiacore.org to stay updated as more information is developed on this new eligible equipment category, and we prepare to launch the voucher request for the heavy duty component of CORE as well. If you have any questions, you can email me at jwhitson@calstart.org or CARB staff lead Todd Sterling at todd.sterling@arb.ca.gov. And that wraps up the update for CORE, and I'll hand it over to Amy to provide an update on Energized.
Thank you, Jacob. Good morning, everyone. It's great to have the opportunity to talk with you today. My name is Amy Gower. I'm the lead project manager for Energized commercial vehicles here at CalStart. I'd like to give you a little overview of Energized, tell you about our recent launch on March 23rd, and then talk with you a little bit about what we have coming up in the future and where you can learn more. So first off, for those of you who might not be familiar, Energized stands for Energy Infrastructure Incentives for Zero Emission Commercial Vehicles. We are dedicated to medium and heavy duty infrastructure for both public and private fleets. We are fortunate to have $50 million in funding authority from CEC and hope that might grow in the future. We fund both hydrogen and EVSE infrastructure projects. This project was designed with the help of hundreds of stakeholders across industry, government, and community groups. Maybe some of you on the phone here today. I just want to say thank you again for all of your input on Energized. I encourage you to read more about our project on energized.org, and I'll put that in the chat for you in just a moment. A couple of key features about Energized. Equity is a really important goal for our project. We've stated that a minimum of 60% of total project dollars will be dedicated to disadvantaged communities, low-income communities, or a variety of small businesses that we've defined in our implementation manual. We feel it's really important to invest in frontline communities who bear the brunt of pollution burden. Technical assistance is another key feature of Energized. We understand that navigating the infrastructure process might be a little bit complicated, so we've developed an infrastructure readiness center geared towards helping applicants through this process. We also encourage stacking funding so we can really maximize investment and get infrastructure in the ground as quickly as possible. We do this through through 4 funding lanes: EV Fast Track, public charging, hydrogen, and EV Jumpstart, which is our equity funding lane. Now I'd like to tell you a little bit about our launch from the EV Fast Track, which opened on March 23rd. So this funding lane was first come, first served, meaning applications were accepted in chronological order. All $16 million of funding available for that lane were fully subscribed within 2 minutes. We're still working through those applications and will notify applicants very soon. We anticipate being able to fund about 40 projects, and 80% of those projects thus far meet our equity criteria, which we're really excited about. Overall, we're pleased with demand and really glad to hear that people know about Energize. We're hopeful that some of the people that were not able to get funded through this round will have opportunities in future funding lanes, which are not first come, first serve, they're actually competitive. So a little bit more on what we have coming in the coming months. HVIP coordination. So as you might have seen through the HVIP application, Energize will soon begin offering infrastructure support to HVIP recipients. We're working on plans to fund school bus set-asides and anticipate being able to share more information with you in the coming weeks. We're also working on our next rounds of funding, including hydrogen, public charging, and EV Jumpstart, which again is our equity funding lane. I'd also like to repeat that those are competitive lanes, not first come, first serve. We plan to offer one each quarter, and we'll be announcing the dates of open for those lanes within about 6 weeks of launching them. So please stay tuned for more information and for updates on those application materials. If you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to check out our website, energized.org, and subscribe to our updates. This will help you learn more about our upcoming funding opportunities, learn more about becoming an approved or a preferred vendor. It will also send you invitations to events through our Infrastructure Readiness Center. And if you have any additional questions, you can contact us at infrastructure@calstart.org for more information. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it over to Nikki for an update on innovative small e-fleets.
Thank you so much, Amy. My name is Nikki O'Cook. I am also with CalStart, and I am leading the work on our innovative small e-fleet set-aside, which for fiscal year 2022 is $25 million within HVIP. So the goal of the Innovative Small E-Fleet, which I will refer to now as ISEF, is to implement innovative solutions for small fleets to really address and overcome some of the barriers that they face. These innovative solutions can include, but are not limited to, things like flexible leases, truck as a service, assistance with infrastructure, individual owner planning assistance, increased available funding, as well as other mechanisms. So traditionally, we know that small fleets and owner operators have faced some unique barriers transitioning to zero-emission trucks, such as high upfront costs, limited financing, complex planning for charging, and by dedicating the set-aside funding for small fleets, HVIP can position itself to better understand the unique needs of this underrepresented group and support their transition to zero-emission in advance of the Advanced Clean Fleets rule. If you've been tracking this process, ISEF did not open with HVIP last month. In fact, last month on March 3rd, we held a public work group with close to 200 participants, where we received input from stakeholders on topics like provider and purchaser eligibility, right? What is the definition of a small fleet for this project? Currently proposed is 20 trucks or less and less than $15 million a year in revenue. Other discussion points were items like the level of funding that would be available for all-inclusive packages. Right, our goal is to create offerings that really make it a easy monthly or per mile basis cost for these small fleets, and includes things like the vehicle, the infrastructure, potentially even the fueling or insurance costs, maintenance, service, a complete full service offering. And so we discussed what levels of funding would be needed to reach those, and currently proposed is 2x of the vehicle voucher level in the current HVIP catalog. We also discussed things like our proposed application process, which at this time is proposed to be a two-step process wherein providers like truck as a service providers, lessors, rental agencies would propose their offering for small fleets. And once that is approved, the voucher process would then proceed very similar or mirroring the current HVIP voucher request approval and redemption process. It's important to note that this particular offering is intended to assist small trucking companies in California. It is not at this time open to bus fleets or public agencies. I'd like to give a really big thank you to those of you who have participated in the work group, and we continue to receive public feedback on our process as we are now developing the implementation manual. Any questions or comments can always be directed to ISEF, which is ISEF at californiahvip.org. We look forward to hearing from you, but the window for opportunity for input is closing because we do look forward to opening this program before summer of this year. Thank you. And with that, I'll turn it back to Jason for questions.
Thank you, Nikki, and thank you everyone for those updates. At this time, we're going to pause and open it up for questions and comments. So I will turn this over to Aria Berliner to provide the instructions on doing that. Aria?
Thanks, Jason. Good morning, everyone. You can use the Zoom feature to raise your hand. For those of you participating by phone, press pound or #2 to raise your hand. When you're called on, please state your name and affiliation. First up, it looks like we have Jamie Levin. Jamie, I have unmuted your mic.
Thank you very much. Jamie Levin with the Center for Transportation and the Environment. Had two comments to make. One, and I raised this before, as it relates to hydrogen and the regional hub program with DOE potentially awarding $9.5 billion throughout the United States. It's going to be so important that the CARB long-term investment, and even in the next 2 fiscal years, will need to be very carefully aligned with those opportunities for cost share. Obviously, industry will have to provide significant cost share, but I want to make sure that the CARB is thinking about how they're going to align with the Energy Commission and the governor's office, which is, I believe, under the GoBiz office, will be taking the lead to start putting together the consortium and the competitive proposal that will be evaluated by the federal government. We have a lot of money here at the state level that can be leveraged significantly to help develop the hydrogen network to drive costs down and to expand the programs that we've been pursuing over the last 5+ years. The second point I wanted to make with respect to Energized, with potential new funding coming forward to expand beyond the 50 million, as it relates to hydrogen, would like to see more than 30% of the total funds allocated to fuel cells and hydrogen programs. So I believe it's fair to split those funds in half so that 50% goes to hydrogen as well as 50% to battery electric. And then funding should be made available for facility improvements to safely work on hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. The current program restricts the funding to fueling stations only, and we do need to be able to upgrade facilities to work on those vehicles safely. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Jamie.
Thank you, Jamie. Next up, we have Peter Anderson. Peter, I've unmuted your mic.
Thank you. I have two items. The first is, given the huge investment that the Biden administration is making in infrastructure, what requirements or regulations that will CARB or the state of California have in place to require that all of that equipment that's being used is going to be at least in a portion low emissions or zero emissions? So that's my first question. My second question is, many municipalities are now putting into place leaf blower bans, and some even for gas-powered lawnmower bans. And we're urging people to get electric appliances in place of those formerly gasoline-powered engines. But one of the problems is an equity issue, that requiring low-income lawn maintenance companies and leaf blower companies, which are often one guy in a truck, may not be able to afford these. So I'm glad to hear that $30 million has been appropriated to enable some of these folks to buy electric equipment. But there's two problems with that. First of all, $30 million seems to be woefully inadequate. That might be enough for one city, but certainly not for the state of California. And the second problem is, what's to prevent lawn maintenance and landscaping companies from keeping and continuing to use their gas-powered lawn equipment when CARB or some other state agency or municipality could have a program to do a trade-in, much as we used to do with automatic weapons, that you can turn them into authorities. And so unless we get those gas-powered equipment off the streets, I'm not sure that providing electric equipment will make all that much of a difference. So thank you for that, and I'm looking forward to your answers.
Thank you for those questions. We do have some staff here today from our off-road team who could probably better address the SOAR, the small off-road engine question, and what's going on with that funding and what our thoughts are there. I think, as you heard, we do have a number of things going on the infrastructure side, both at CARB as well as with our partners at the Energy Commission, and you're going to hear more about what's happening there from them in a little later in today's meeting. But first, I did want to see if anyone from our off-road team wants to speak to the SOAR question first.
Sure, Jason, I can take that one. Hi, this is Tess Seacat, and the $30 million is being implemented through CORE, and that is specific to the small business sole proprietors And you're right, it's a step in the right direction, but we are learning about more how to outreach and make sure that those dollars are used effectively. There are existing programs that speak to your other point about removal of the IC or the spark ignited counterparts. And so the district run programs, as we get further along with the acceptance of the equipment and the comfort level, market acceptance by the users, then we can certainly go ahead and move forward with those kinds of scrap programs for them. And those will develop further as well. But those have been in place for a long time relative to residential equipment, and they've done them as event models also. Local air districts have done them based on their local priorities. So,
Thank you.
We do not have any more raised hands, but we do have a few questions in the Q&A box. The first is from Harmony Gates. Amy Gower, what are the Energized websites, please? I'll let Amy answer that live.
Thank you. It is energized.org, and I'll put that in the chat. Thank you.
And Eric asks, if gardeners have too many customers, can they have many batteries?
I can take that one probably just live. So the short answer is yes. They can have multiple batteries for one piece of handheld equipment. And we're definitely looking for stakeholder feedback on this topic as we approach the work groups that will be taking place here over the next several months as we get ready to open the landscaping portion of CORE. So I encourage you to sign up for our listserv on our website and stay connected and participate in that public process and provide your feedback for the SOAR component of CORE.
Thank you, Jacob. We do have a raised hand from Parth. Parth, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your mic.
Thank you. So my question, and I've spoken with Nikki a bit about this as well, is if a technology enables you to convert a diesel TRU into an electrical one by supplying some form of shore power in the form of a battery pack on the trailer itself, how do we start the discussion about fleets being able to keep their existing diesel, for example, vector units on TRUs, and then use the battery pack as their sole power? Right now, what's happening is the ask is you need to get rid of that diesel component from the TRU, and only then can it be eligible for any sort of incentive. I think that really, anyone who has invested in those TRUs, they're not going to just throw it away after let's say a year of use. And a technology, let's say for example, ConMet from our end has introduced a technology that converts them into electric by just plugging it directly into a battery system. That eliminates all the emissions, that makes it into an electric TRU, so as to say, but it doesn't need you to throw away the diesel components, which have of course cost quite a bit when you purchase the TRU. So who can we start a discussion around this? Because so far what we have heard is you have to throw away the diesel components and only then will you be eligible. This is not using diesel, it's just the components still remain, and it reduces the cost from the fleet owner side of things.
Yeah, thank you for that question. That is probably better addressed by our TRU team here at CARB, and I can certainly connect with them and see what the thinking is behind that, because they've obviously spent a lot of time in figuring out what's the best way to determine eligibility and all that. But I'm happy to connect with you offline as well, and if you haven't already reached out to them, we can certainly pull them in and connect you on that too.
Yeah, are you talking about Leah and Kevin and those guys?
Yes.
We have connected, I mean, a bit, but yeah, I mean, the more we can get a conversation going, I mean, with as many people as possible, that'd be great. So Jason, if you and I need to talk, or if you know someone else, we can definitely go further down that road.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Parth and Jason. We do have one more question in the Q&A box from Kyle. Rise Robotics is now developing next-gen ZE loaded container handlers that will use smaller batteries than what has been proposed before by other OEMs. What is the process for having our voucher be, sorry, excuse me, what is the process for having our machine be voucher eligible?
I can take this one. I think this would be related to core. So you can check out our website. I put the link in the chat on how to participate. You need to fill out attachment A of the implementation manual and submit that to the CARB staff. And then it will go through a review process and you'll work with the CARB team on that. And then if it's deemed eligible, then your that equipment would be an approved eligible piece of equipment in the core catalog. So go ahead and take a look at that link that I put in the chat. And if you need more information, please feel free to reach out to myself or the CARB staff.
Thank you, Jacob. And we have one more raised hand. Olivia Seidman, excuse me. I've unmuted your mic.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That was an accident. I didn't realize my hand was up.
No worries. Thank you. Just as a reminder, for people asking Q&A, excuse me, making comments or asking questions, please state your name and affiliation when you're called on. And that is it. We have no more raised hands or questions in the Q&A box.
All right. Thank you, Aria. I believe we will move on, keep going with the agenda then. So next up on our agenda, we're going to talk about what are the updates we're planning for this year's heavy duty investment strategy. And so I'm going to start off with a discussion of updates to our Beachhead strategy. And as part of last year's update to the heavy duty investment strategy, we realized that there was no longer a need for a separate beachhead that highlighted different efficiencies. And so what we did is we ended up incorporating the applications that were included in the efficiencies beachhead into the other two existing beachheads. And in much the same way, as part of this year's update, given that the statewide focus is now more centered on zero emission technologies, consistent with the governor's executive order, as well as the recent adoption of new regulations and development of those regulations. CARB's focus for the heavy duty investment strategy really remains on zero emission and zero emission enabling technologies for these low carbon transportation investments. And we don't see the need to continue to include a separate combustion beachhead. So for the purposes of this plan, we have defined near zero emission technology as zero emission enabling, or those cleanest combustion technologies that meet the new optional 0.01 gram NOx standard. And we believe that we can incorporate technologies that use these zero emission enabling strategies into the existing zero emission beachhead structure. And this is not to say that we're completely removing combustion from the beachhead strategy, but rather we'll be shifting it to more of a qualitative discussion within the strategy document for this year. There still will continue to be a role for these combustion technologies. And I'll just note that there continues to be funding available for combustion technologies through other programs in CARB's larger incentives portfolio. And we're always looking at ways to update and improve this each year and continue to look at that as we go forward in this space. So that is what's happening with the beachheads. And I see Jesse has posted a link to some more information, background information on beachheads there. So thank you for that, Jesse. And at this point, I am going to also turn this over to Jesse Lund at CalSTART to talk about the updates to our technology status snapshots for next year. Jesse?
Thanks, Jason. As Jason said, my name is Jessie Lund. I'm with CalSTART. The first topic we're going to talk through today are the technology status snapshots. If you're not familiar with these are a way to track progress. In each year's heavy-duty investment strategy, we include an update of the technology status snapshots, which show the current status of the main technologies, so battery electric, fuel cell electric, and hybrid, and the heavy-duty applications within each of them for both on and off-road use. The snapshots help provide a better understanding of where these applications stand in terms of technology readiness along the commercialization pathway, whether they're at the demonstration phase, pilot stage, or entering into commercial availability. For consistency and to track progress, these updated assessments will build on those from the previous year's investment strategy and adjust them for changes over the course of the year. And while these assessments were originally built from technology assessments conducted by CARB staff, along with staff from other agencies and industry, the draft updates will be based on reviews of additional or updated data and information from literature, public information sources, private conversations with technology providers, and field data where available. Related to technology status snapshots, I also want to talk through market readiness indicators. So over the past few years and in previous versions of the heavy duty investment strategy, we've talked at length about the technology readiness. And as I just mentioned, we'll be updating those this year. However, technology readiness only shows part of the process of new technologies coming to market. There are also a number of factors that affect overall market readiness. In the last 2 years, we've started going through the process of developing market readiness indicators that can help to assess progress in these areas. Previous strategy documents described market readiness from the perspective of 4 primary categories, including current market scale, projected investment scale, service applicability, and economic feasibility. And while previous strategy documents defined each of these categories and explained how they can impact market readiness and technology adoption, for this year's strategy, we plan to evaluate each technologically mature vehicle type against these indicators. So for the first time, we expect to include these market readiness evaluations in graphical form, similar to the technology status snapshot graphics that you might be familiar with. And we're also exploring expanding the market readiness indicators to explicitly include categories such as production capacity, infrastructure readiness, and availability of a trained workforce and of sufficient service networks, all of which we know impact the market readiness of these technologies. For more information on the technology status snapshots and market readiness indicators, I invite you to review the white paper, whose link I will post in the chat, and also happy to take questions once it's time for that. Otherwise, in addition to tracking technology progress through these status snapshots and market readiness indicators, it's also important to evaluate the success of California's investments against additional metrics. And so to talk about these metrics, I will turn it over to Tara.
Thank you, Jesse. My name is Tara Campy, and I'm the HVIP Deputy Director at CalSTART. And past editions of this investment strategy have worked with stakeholders to develop a robust set of metrics in 3 overarching categories, which are creating healthy communities and supporting technology evolution while building the green economy. So past editions have published metrics in several specific areas within these categories, including data about clean vehicles, miles traveled by vehicles funded throughout California by low carbon transportation investments, job creation, investments specifically in disadvantaged communities, investments targeted to small and public fleets, OEM growth in the market, for example, over the past 10 years of the HVIP program and the 10 years of market acceleration activity that have happened, the considerable growth in participating manufacturers in that activity, supply chain diversity, component costs, and private investments that have been leveraged by the transformational public investments in this space. So it's increasingly important going forward to evaluate the metrics of the investments that are made. And with the historic reopening of HVIP last month that Andrea Morgan provided an overview of, there's a lot of additional data that will be coming available to be evaluated about market activity. So going forward, it will be important to continue and increase the focus on equity and ensuring that metrics are looking at ways that these investments are supporting the most impacted communities, supporting high quality jobs and workforce development, and really intentional funding for disadvantaged communities and small fleets and individual owner operators with investments such as the ISEF program. We also look forward to working with stakeholders to develop increased metrics around public health. The public health literature is clear as to the many benefits of offsetting diesel emissions, such as reducing particulate matter that's tied to asthma and heart and lung problems. So there are options we'd like to look into regarding calibrating data from exposure studies or other potential data sources in that area. We look forward to working with all of you on developing the metrics that will be pursued this year for this year's edition of the strategy. And I will hand it over to Jason to talk about the investment table for this year's publication.
Thanks, Tara. So one of the elements that is included in each year's strategy is the 3-year draft recommendations table. This table shows what we've identified as the 3-year low carbon transportation investment priorities. It provides a snapshot in time that incorporates a rolling 3-year funding horizon, expanding on the levels of funding that were detailed in last year's strategy. These funding recommendations build on our core priorities, which are updated to reflect the current status and direction of technologies for this year. And the recommended funding levels will be presented by fiscal year and by stage of technology, which is demonstration, pilot, and commercial stage, and showing the highest priorities for state funding in the table. I just want to note that each year there are smaller vehicle and equipment types that are aggregated within the table, as it would be impossible to list every possible vehicle and type of equipment within the one single table. So this year's recommendations will start with fiscal year 2023-24, continue with 24-25, and add a new third year of 2025-26. There are some general trends that we're starting to see and that we'll include as we update the technology status snapshots. And some highlights of these and things that we're thinking about for this year include a move to support longer range, long haul zero emission trucks, including a larger scale zero emission fueling or charging network, a zero emission ecosystem concept to support an entire fleet of vehicles and equipment for things like construction, mining, or road paving application, things like that. Conversion of a rental fleet to zero emission, further development in the zero emission marine and rail applications, potentially partnering with a large municipality to operate zero emission green zones or citywide fleet turnover, as well as continued expansion of zero emission cargo handling equipment, things like heavy lifts, rubber tired gantry cranes and top picks, and even potentially zero emission aviation. We certainly are interested in getting more feedback on what you see as the priorities for these next 3 years, what has the greatest potential and could most benefit from incentive funding within the heavy duty vehicle and equipment space. So next up, to talk about the last update here on our list on potential industry examples, again, is Jessie Lund. Jessie.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, so each year we provide a number of industry examples or mini case studies in the heavy duty investment strategy. These are short, concise examples that showcase advances in technology with a focus on outcomes. So typically projects that are further along or complete. And some considerations for this year include something on off-road equipment. As you've probably heard on this call, there's certainly an increasing interest as well as model availability. So we're considering perhaps including an industry example on the construction or even hovercraft side. Also considering a deeper dive into manufacturing in California specifically. And we've also heard a bit from the industry around V2G or vehicle to grid, vehicle to building, perhaps something focused on some of the school bus pilots that have been underway in the state. And we're also considering an industry example around electrification as a service business models, which Kevin covered up at the top of this meeting, or transit case study, perhaps around the US's first 100% zero emission fleet, which is located in the state. But if you have feedback on topics or even specific projects that you'd like to see highlighted in this year's heavy duty investment strategy, we want to hear from you. Please feel free to share feedback, whether on today's call or to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to post my email in the comments. Thank you. I will now turn it over to Aria for Q&A.
Thank you, Jessie. Once again, please use the Zoom feature to raise your hand. For those of you participating by phone, press pound or #2 to raise your hand. When you're called on, please state your name and affiliation. First up, we have Jamie Levin. Jamie, I've unmuted your mic.
Thank you very much. Jamie Levin from the Center for Transportation and the Environment. First of all, I just quickly looked through the Beachhead white paper, and I noticed on page 14 there were a list of different OEMs involved in advanced fuel cell technology, and what was not being referenced was the Hyundai project, the Hyundai Class 8 truck that we're actually involved in deploying next year, with up to a 500-mile range, carrying up to a 40,000 pound payload. So I would hope that would be reflected in CalStart's assessment. Secondly, as in terms of beachhead strategies, I would hope CARB would consider looking at ways to improve vehicle efficiency. There was some earlier reference in today's call to some of the improvements that are being made with batteries, which are all very good for purposes of advancing zero emission. But there also are technology improvements in the fuel cell arena and in the complete vehicle integration to improve vehicle efficiency on the hydrogen and fuel cell applications. And I think there are opportunities to fund some of those component improvements or innovations that will, again, show clear evidence of efficiency improvements, longer range because of better fuel economy. And thirdly, I think there are some other modes in the application arena to explore development of prototypes. You've identified transit buses have made great progress. Our organization has helped accelerate that progress, and it's looking very positive. But we also look at coaches, which are a heavier vehicle, three-axle coaches, which are operated both in the private and public sector. We still do not have a prototype vehicle that is zero emission, that can handle the payload, the range, and the fueling speeds that are required for some of these duty cycles. So I would look at coach applications as an opportunity to develop prototypes, which is different from a transit bus. And the other possible applications that I think need potential investment in as far as prototypes would be rail, not locomotives, but light rail projects. There is a project that's playing out in San Bernardino but there are other similar projects elsewhere in the state. I know Caltrans is very interested in this, in which rather than replacing rail with existing catenary, utilizing fuel cells as an option for propulsion technology in that particular application. And lastly, vocational utility trucks, so using Class 6 vehicles that are integrated with the ability to export power for service work used by electric, gas, and wastewater or water, agencies in the work that they do. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Just a couple of comments. We do anticipate that we'll be updating that Beachhead white paper as time goes on, because certainly things change rapidly. So we'll be working to update that periodically. And the vehicle efficiencies, that's good. I'm glad you brought that up. We do want to keep reporting on those. Just note that we'll be reporting on them as part of the overall zero emission beachhead and showing how they fit in there. And then thank you for highlighting those other modes. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Jamie and Jason. Next up, we have Ray Pingle. Ray, I have unmuted your mic.
Hi, this is Ray Pingle from Sierra Club, California. Jessica, did I hear you say that one of the industry examples that you're considering is trucking as a service? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and I would just like to add that I would like to nominate charging as a service. I think trucking as a service is a great one to do, but I also think charging as a service is a really good one, because I think it'll have broader application for a larger number of fleets and so on. So I'd just like to recommend that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely really appreciate that comment. I think I put it under a broad umbrella of electrification as a service, but we are considering all of those options and totally agree that this is an opportunity to make these technologies available to a wider spectrum of
Excellent.
fleets.
Thanks. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray and Jesse. We don't have any more raised hands, and it doesn't look like there are any questions in the Q&A box.
All right. Well, thank you, Aria. I appreciate that. We will then move on to our next item on the agenda. And so I'm going to turn to Eric Patton, who will provide an update on the school bus report that's being developed in conjunction with our heavy duty investment strategy pursuant to SB 1403. So Eric, take it away.
Thanks, Jason. Just had to take a second to get unmuted and my computer here. All right. So yes, I'll be covering SB 1403 report here today. Senate Bill SB 1403 mandates that CARB, in conjunction with CEC, provide a report annually on the state school bus incentive programs as part of the heavy duty investment strategy. This statute requires an update on the milestones achieved by incentive programs and a projected need for funding considering the statewide school bus inventory, turnover, and useful life. The report also includes a discussion of zero-emission school buses, their role in the transformation to meet California's air quality and greenhouse gas reduction goals, and case studies of school districts that have incorporated zero-emission school buses in their fleets. Today, I'll touch on a few key stats from last year's report to highlight the updates we'll be making in this year's report. The 2021 SB 1403 report indicated that FY 21-22 budget, that the FY 2021-22 budget includes a 3-year allocation of $450 million in funding to support incentives to deploy 1,000 zero-emission school buses in California. The first installment of $150 million includes $130 million to CARB for zero-emission buses and $20 million to CEC for infrastructure. The funding was provided as a set-aside through HVIP in small and medium air districts. The second installment of $150 million is proposed in the state budget for FY 2022-23. CARB and CEC are coordinating to ensure that funding for infrastructure is available for new zero-emission school buses. The 2021 report indicated that approximately $110 million, let's stay back on that side, thanks. $110 million was spent or allocated to school bus cleanup since July 2020. We are planning to provide an update of all this information in an upcoming report. The bipartisan infrastructure law Clean School Bus Program will provide $5 billion in funding over 5 years from 2022 to 2026 for the replacement of existing school buses with low and zero emission school buses. Half of the available funding is dedicated for zero emission school buses and half is for clean school buses. Applications for rebates in the 2022 Clean School Bus Program will open this month. We plan to provide an update of all funding sources, including this major new source of funding in this year's report. Okay, next slide now. In 2021, CARB staff estimated there were approximately 24,100 school buses operating in California. Approximately 53% of the fleet was diesel, which is CARB's main area of focus and concern. Because diesel particulate matter is a toxic air contaminant may have health impacts at any amount. So reducing diesel PM exposure is a major focus of
Okay, it looks like we may be having some technical difficulties here. Might have lost Eric there. So maybe we will come back to this in a couple minutes. So I think we can go ahead and move on to our next item. And again, we can circle back when Eric is able to reconnect with us. The next item on our agenda is an overview of SB 372, which is a new pilot program. And talking about this today is Danielle Lawrence. Danielle?
Hello, my name is Danielle Lawrence, and I'm the lead staff on our efforts on SB 372. So as you're considering your comments for updating the heavy-duty investment strategy, we wanted to make sure to tell everyone a bit more about SB 372. So this bill was approved late last year by the governor, and it directs CARB and the CPCFA to develop and administer a program to make financing tools and supports available to the owners of medium and heavy duty vehicle fleets to fully enable them to transition to zero emission. The program is referred to as the Medium and Heavy Duty Zero Emission Vehicle Fleet Purchasing Assistance Program. And this bill identifies a wide variety of elements that are necessary to assist and support all different sizes and sectors of medium and heavy duty fleets in their transition to zero emission. And some of these elements include financial and non-financial supports, an outreach and marketing campaign, incorporating stakeholder feedback is a really big one. Developing metrics to determine program success, and also coordination and alignment with partnering state agencies such as CPCFA, also the PUC or Public Utilities Commission, and the California Energy Commission. So the bill specifies that CARB may allocate funding from the AQIP or Air Quality Improvement Fund. This source of funding is what currently funds the current truck loan assistance program. It also specifies the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, or GGRF, in which LCT funds are part of the GGRF program, and or the general fund. So the spirit of this bill supports and aligns with the heavy duty investment strategy and LCT investment priority of zero emission in general, and really the zero emission demo and pilot projects. So CARB and other state agencies already have many activities that are underway to support the goals of this program. Some examples include the CARB's existing truck loan assistance program, and also the innovative small e-fleets or ISEF pilot through HVIP, as well as a variety of non-financial supports that are continuously being expanded, such as our ZEV truck stop webpage and the Sustainable Fleets Recognition Program for ZEV fleets. We know there is a lot more that can be done to support medium and heavy duty fleets that are transitioning to zero emission. And we know that we need to get a lot of stakeholder feedback and hear what financial and non-financial supports will help various types of fleets overcome barriers and assist in the adoption of zero emission technology. So we are listening and learning from what small fleet owners and community advocates have already shared with us, building connections with stakeholders in priority populations and communities, and making the most of clean truck efforts that are already underway, such as the Advanced Clean Fleets or ACF regulation. We extend the invitation to you to reach out to us directly and make us aware of people you know that should or need to be included in this discussion. So in June, we will begin a coordinated stakeholder engagement effort to discuss 372 and overall truck transitioning strategies in more detail. We're still developing the plan, but this could include listening sessions, community meetings, and individual meetings with stakeholders to get feedback to design and inform the SB 372 effort. So to wrap up this section on 372, I wanted to go over a few points on next steps and how to be involved or get more involved in the SB 372 process. So obviously continue to be involved in the heavy duty investment strategy and the annual funding plan process for LCT and AQIP investments. So Jason already covered some of the important funding plan and workshop dates, and he may have time to cover them again at the end of this work group. So also participating in project-specific work groups, such as the truck loan program specific work group on May 4th. During this workshop or work group, we will discuss details of the truck loan assistance program, the proposed new ZE loan pilot, and also allocations for these programs for the 22-23 funding plan. And really, this is just one piece of the larger SB 372 effort. And then also getting involved in the broad discussion and stakeholder engagement effort on SB 372. That will kick off at the beginning of June. And over several months, we plan to hold group and individual meetings to get input and feedback on how to best support truck transition to zero emission. So you can reach out to me directly via email. I will post it in the chat, and you can also comment or ask questions during the Q&A period. So with that, I will turn it over to Aria for Q&A, or maybe Jason if the technical difficulties were resolved for the SB 1403 update.
Thank you, Danielle. I will, if Eric is back in the
Yes, I'm back, Jason.
meeting. Okay, if you're ready to resume where things dropped off.
Yeah, sorry about that. I
No worries.
suddenly lost my connection there. but we were on slide 3. I think the next one, Jason. There, okay. All right, so let's continue. So in 2021, CARB staff estimated there were approximately 24,100 school buses operating in California. Approximately 53% of the fleet was diesel, which is CARB's main area of focus and concern, because diesel particulate matter is a toxic air contaminant. Toxic air contaminants may have health impacts at any amount, so reducing diesel PM exposure is a major focus of efforts to clean up the school bus fleet. The oldest diesel fuel buses are of greatest concern that need to be turned over since they were designed to meet less stringent, higher emitting emission standards that existed at the time. We are reassessing the bus population statistics to update this chart in the upcoming report. Next slide. We estimated last year that to align the turnover of school buses with this state mandate that all operations of medium and heavy duty vehicles to be zero emission by 2045, where feasible, it would take approximately 24 years at a rate of 4% turnover per year. To fund replacement of these school buses, it would cost annually approximately $260 million annually for zero emission battery electric, not including infrastructure. Given the significant recent funding for school buses, we plan to update these figures in this year's report. CARB has a long history of funding school bus cleanup for projects and implementing pollution reducing laws for school buses to reduce school children's exposure to both cancer-causing and smog-forming pollution. In consultation with CEC, CARB will update the 2021 SB 1403 report, including milestones achieved, updates on incentive programs, and updates on the projected need for funding considering the school bus inventory, turnover, and useful life. Next. Good. If you have any questions or concerns about the report, please contact me. Thank you to everyone for participating today. I'll turn it back to you, Jason. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric. And so now we'll pause again to take questions and comments. And so I will turn this back over to Aria.
Thank you, Jason. We do have one raised hand. First up is Lauren Navarro. And just as a reminder, please state your name and affiliation. Thank you. Lauren, I've unmuted your mic.
Hi, this is Laura Navarro with Environmental Defense Fund. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Basically, we were the sponsors of SB 372, and I really continue to be involved in the work here, looking forward to everything that you have planned and beyond in the future. I think that we sort of see together. So I just want to start out by commending what you're doing so far and sort of the far range visioning that you're thinking about in the future. I'm really glad to hear and look forward to participating and helping in whatever way we can with the stakeholder outreach process that you have planned for June. I agree with Danielle that we need to really figure out like the ecosystem of tools that will work, that will provide what fleets need to transition to ZEV in underserved communities. Let's keep pushing on SB 372 and I think all of the different tools that it can offer to really meet the state's ZEV, medium, and heavy duty truck goals. So thank you, and I look forward to working with you more on this in the future. And great work so far.
Thank you so much, Lauren. We appreciate your support in this. So we look forward to coordinating with you more as well.
Thank you, Danielle.
Next up, we have, okay, I'm unmuted, sorry. Next up, we have Christian Corby. Christian, I've unmuted your mic.
Hi there, good morning, everyone. My name is Christian Corby, and I'm the Deputy Executive Director at the California Electric Transportation Coalition. And just a quick comment, in hearing the development of the SB 672 programs, I would highly recommend having some targeted outreach with the utilities, both IOUs and POUs, and the regional air quality districts in order to kind of tap into their knowledge about what they're seeing in the medium and heavy duty fleet space and how their programs have been working, what types of fleets have been reaching out, and even potentially what types of problems they're having with developing or with meeting the needs of those fleets. I think there's a lot of built up knowledge already on the kind of light duty side, and I know it won't translate exactly, but I think they have a lot of knowledge already about how incentive programs are working and how they're really trying to get a lot of money out the door too to get infrastructure in the ground for fleets, and I hope that they could really be a good resource for you. So just a quick recommendation on that, and look forward to seeing how it goes. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. That is a great suggestion, and we have coordinated with our utilities, but I think to continue to coordinate and get updates on things that they are learning through their programs in this space is a great idea. So.
Thank you, Danielle, and thank you, Christian. Next up, we have Matt Schrapp. Matt, I have unmuted your mic.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to comment here briefly. One thing, Danielle, you had mentioned possibly Jason putting up at the end of the presentation some of these upcoming meetings. I'm sure he's probably planning on doing that, but I know that would be helpful. Not sure if you guys have sent out notifications regarding the May 4th work group yet on SB 372, but I'm keeping an eye out for it, and I have the saved date here on my calendar. And I would agree with the previous commenter, definitely want to try to get as many stakeholders engaged as possible. Curious, you guys had mentioned you'd been doing some outreach to quote unquote small fleets. I'm just wondering if we, at this work group meeting, will get a better understanding of, what industry segments these small fleets represent, kind of frequency of conversation, because although perhaps the economics may be, apologize for these background email noises here, but although the economics may be similar across different fleet and vocational segments, they can have nuances that prevent the same type of activities that would take place in one fleet vocational segment compared to another one. And then also really pinning down what we mean by small fleets. Again, if we look at what Carl Moyer VIP and what the existing on-road truck loan program looks at, we see a fleet of 10 or fewer. If we look into the on-road truck and bus rule, we see a fleets of 3 and fewer. It varies from there depending on who you talk to, I guess, but I think that would be a good place to at least try to get some consistency across all of these programs and what is considered a small fleet, and whether it's by number of trucks that are registered to that fleet, and then how is that considered? Is that a common ownership or control question? Is that number of vehicles registered in California? Is that over a GVWR segment? Perhaps, since the Advanced Clean Fleets rule is looking at over 8,500, that's where that threshold would be. So I think all these questions are important, and obviously it's SB 372 is not just meant for small fleets. We need to have these larger, more well-capitalized fleets to be incentivized in order to procure and deploy zero emissions equipment in order to populate the secondary market. I'll just say it. That's why this HVIP fleet size limitation is misdirected without a doubt. So I think that there's a lot of things that we are looking forward to discussing with the larger work group. I think SB 372 is a great opportunity to create this ecosystem, as Lauren was referring to, and really kind of combine all these tools that are out there by leveraging the vast amounts of knowledge that exist within incentive program administrators through utilities, or excuse me, through local air districts, and then bringing in utilities and some of helping fleets understand the programs that they have through Charge Ready Transport or some of the other localized ones like SMUD or DWP. So looking forward to hearing more information, especially about that May 4th work group. And I imagine it will truly inform what the June coordination is going to look like for these larger stakeholder groups. So I guess the only question I had was if you guys are planning on talking about, what small fleet vocational segments you have actually been speaking to in your outreach programs. I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thanks for your comment, Matt. I can also answer the question that the announcement for that work group has not yet gone out. So it'll probably go out the week after next, but save the date, May 4th at 1 p.m. So in terms of the small fleet outreach, at this point, we haven't done any, I guess, specific outreach, you can say, on 372, but we are taking what we've already learned through other outreach efforts, such as Advanced Clean Fleets and other programs that we can hear what stakeholders have told us in terms of their needs to transition to zero emission. So we haven't started like any new outreach for 372 at this point. So it is like listening and taking in what messages have already been told to CARB to make sure that we're not asking repeated questions over to the same stakeholders.
That's great. Thank you, Danielle. I forgot that I did ask a question about if that had been sent out. So thank you. And I think it's really important that we look at these segments, vocational segments, because something that might be defined as a small fleet operator for a FedEx contractor who has a residential route, who technically could be considered a small fleet depending on the size of the route and the number of vehicles that he or her or they operate, compared to someone who perhaps is in our industry's purview in drayage. Again, it's business models aside. I think that within the individual market segments, there are unique challenges that would, I guess, inhibit folks' abilities to do this rapid adoption of ZEV. If there's no location to charge back at your facility because you don't own your land and your landlord won't let you install, and there's no depot charging, as opposed to somebody who's in a different segment or works for a major corporation that might be providing some type of charging infrastructure on a dedicated facility, especially in those off-peak hours in the evening when energy is typically its cheapest. So that I just would, I guess, echo that we need to continue with the outreach, hopefully not ask the same questions, but be sensitive to the differences between these market segments. Small fleet isn't necessarily a small fleet, just like a truck isn't just a truck. So it's important. I know you guys, you have your work cut out for you, and I have the utmost faith, and we're happy to participate in all of these discussions moving forward. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And, we are working on the agenda for that work group at this point, and discussing what we mean by small fleets is already on the list. So I think that we can, further discuss this, have this conversation at that work group, and it will be really good. So I look forward to it. But thank you for your comments now.
Thank you, Matt and Danielle. Next up, we have Glenn Cho. Glenn, I've unmuted your mic.
Thank you, Aria. This is actually also a comment related to SB 372. The question I have is, I understand the scope is focused on trucks. I was wondering if there was a focus also on infrastructure providers like gas stations or our or even parking lots. We do recognize the acceleration of adoption of ZEVs, both fuel cell as well as EVs, require infrastructure to be in parallel with the vehicles. But if the funding is kind of more or less being a support system for trucks, could it also be extended to infrastructure providers? And I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, I'm with Toyota Motors North America.
Thanks, Glenn. Yeah, you know, this bill, it is very specific to supporting owners of fleets that are making the transition to zero emission. So I don't know how far into specific support for owners of infrastructure, but definitely in an aspect where a fleet would maybe not own their own infrastructure and need the support of infrastructure from another source. So if they're not able to maybe install infrastructure or don't have the property to install infrastructure, that would still be supporting a fleet that's making the transition. And that might look different for a fleet that does or does not own their own land or have the ability to own their own infrastructure. So I would say, like in a roundabout way, it would support infrastructure as well. But really focusing on the fleets and what those fleets need.
So if we had to be very narrow about this, then could we say for potentially if a fleet wants to have a battery charging station and they don't own the land, or nor do they have a warehouse location, and they decide to acquire a separate piece of property to install that, could this financial support also be in that area, or no?
Well, I will have to say that with that, the financial supports are still being developed. So I think that is a really good question and something that we need to look at. So in terms of programs that are specific to 372, the Truck Loan Assistance Work Group and the proposed new ZE pilot, we will be discussing some of those points and what types of financing could be offered for, you know, maybe a property owner versus just that doesn't have trucks or operate trucks, and a fleet that both operates trucks and owns the property. So I think that is going to be part of the discussion, definitely moving forward, but there hasn't been like a full decision on that, and it hasn't been a full extent of the financial supports through 372 yet either, but definitely a topic that we need to keep on our radar.
Thank you. I mean, one things that we would like to share from our outreach with various fleets and also entities is that a lot of CEC fundings and CAR fundings for infrastructure helps with the equipment. But one aspect with larger vehicles, like in the heavy duty, medium duty side, is real estate is important.
Okay,
and that is a concern, is that, yeah, it's great that we can get funding for infrastructure equipment, but we don't know where to put them.
Okay. Yeah, that is a really good point. Yeah. Well, that's definitely something that we'll keep in our conversations and, you know, see how we can address it moving forward. And Glenn, I'm sorry, I missed what company or organization you were with?
I'm with Toyota Motors North America.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Glenn and Danielle, once again. We have one more raised hand. Jamie Levin. Jamie, I've unmuted your mic.
Oh, thank you. Jamie Levin with the Center for Transportation and the Environment. This, I had to drop for a moment, so someone else may have asked or raised a question. Two things with respect to the SB 372. Would that financing include support for taxes that can be very, especially with these zero emission vehicles, can be very prohibitive in affording zero emission vehicles? The federal excise tax, which is at 12%, and the even with the state hopefully adopting an exemption for the state portion of the sales tax for zero emission this year. We're hoping for that. It's still a very expensive proposition. And so would financing include, beyond the MSRP, those kinds of costs as well? That's my question. But before, just another comment, and this sort of got raised with the last speaker and others. Even if you provide financing for the capital purchase, what really matters to the fleet operator is the TCO, the total cost of ownership. And so what we're showing with zero emission, and we ourselves, CTE is working with fuel cell deployments, that we're showing great efficiencies in that application to be able to give range, extended range, improved payload capacity, rapid refueling. Those are all great efficiency improvements. But for the fleet operator, they still have to deal with the TCO, which means cost of fuel, which right now is still on the high end. So as you look towards how to assist fleets to move in the direction of transitioning to zero emission, you really need to be looking at the total cost of ownership to help them afford the operational side of this technology. So first, my question, and then please take my comment in your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate that comment. And that's definitely, TCO is definitely something we're going to have to dive into further and incorporate into whatever we do with SB 372. In terms of your question, if the financing would support taxes, in general, at this point, we really have the truck loan program and the new proposed CE pilot that are within the 372 program. So I will, that's something that we'll have to think about more for future programs that are developed within 372. But my understanding, which Eric, I'm going to push this to you, is that the taxes would be financeable under the truck loan assistance program.
I hope you're right. That sounds good.
Is that right, Eric?
Actually, with the loan program, taxes aren't, in the current program, taxes aren't covered.
Oh, okay.
It's the purchase of the vehicle and the maintenance. You can also put maintenance as part of it. But yeah, with it's still something we can consider with the zero emission loan pilot. So
yeah, okay.
Think about that. If you take federal excise tax on trucks, plus state sales, all the sales tax in California, right now that's in some counties, that's 22.25%. That's an extraordinary amount of money. And with the California state exemption, that would be a reduction of about 3.9%. That's an improvement, but it's still a really steep cost to incur. So,
okay. Well, thank you for bringing that up. That's definitely something that we can look further into as we're moving forward with the new or the proposed pilot.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Omar Gonzalez. Omar, I have unmuted your mic.
Hi, thank you. This is Omar Gonzalez with Nikola Corporation. I would just echo what Jamie Levin had just mentioned about TCO. We're just going to need sort of, as many sort of tools in the bucket as we can to address the total cost of ownership for, for the purchase price of these vehicles up front. And again, echo the comments that Matt and Glenn, I think, also made about infrastructure. Nikola just signed an agreement with ENGS Commercial Finance Company, which is a member of the Mitsubishi UFJ Capital Group, to facilitate sales of Class 8 Nikola Tre battery electric vehicles and our hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles as well. And that's going to offer customer finance solutions for those vehicles, charging assets, and infrastructure requirements. So I think, whatever comes out of 372 will complement what OEMs are doing and what our dealers are doing. But in order to sort of address some of the gaps that will still, come out of the gaps that exist in terms of funding all of these different vehicles and the infrastructure and the fuel. So we look forward to participating in the work group sessions.
Great. Thanks so much for your comment.
Thank you. Next up, we have Matt Schrapp. Matt, I have unmuted your mic.
Hi, guys. Matt Schrapp at the Harbor Trucking Association, and I'll keep it brief, but I think this is why it's important for us to really recognize what those existing tools are because of the comments about the taxes in particular. I can tell you that the way the current on-road loan program works is that it provides a percentage contribution into a lender's reserve pool. And this percentage contribution is based on the total amount financed for the vehicle. So my understanding is that if there is a total amount that's financed, whatever that financed amount is what the reserve contribution percentage is based on. And that would include FET and sales tax. So, we consider a loan program as being a benefit to the borrower at the end of the day, but really it needs to incentivize lenders. And short of the state of California becoming its own lending entity, which years ago, the state went down that pathway with a couple different RFPs, and effectively it was unable to follow through on that using DGS as the administrator, and the CalCap on-road program really is where that had flourished after that fact. So my experience is that the taxes are able to be included into the reserve pool contribution that's given to the lender. So it's important to look at what is existing out there, and outside of asking the same questions to the same fleets or the same questions of the same type of fleets, we definitely don't want to reinvent the wheel on programs that exist and work for lenders who would be working in the loan portion of SB 372. I believe there's a bill going through the legislature that would exempt state sales tax for zero emissions purchases. I know that the bill that O'Donnell was running, the number escapes me now. I apologize because we were a co-sponsor of it that would have exempted ZEV and low-NOx technology. Suffice to say that bill died, but I was under the impression that the ZEV only sales tax exemption was still on the table. Perhaps that could be a topic for our May 4th meeting. But nevertheless, I think it's important to recognize that those existing tools today and how we craft something, especially around a loan program, leverages the experience of the lenders who have been participating in the current truck loan program and how they've been able to be successful in helping these smaller fleets, especially for 10 or fewer, since they're the only ones who are eligible, and really building off those successes to create something that is going to be viable moving forward, that addresses these additional costs. And Jamie, it can be as high as 22.75 in the state of California. So it does get expensive on top of that. So thank you again, Danielle. Just wanted to make that point of clarification.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next up, we have Jamie Levin. Jamie, I've unmuted your mic.
Hey, thanks for letting me come back in. Matt asked the question about the exemption of state sales tax. There is SB 542. It passed through the Senate. It's sitting with the Assembly right now, and we're pushing to try and get that completely adopted so it could go into effect beginning, I believe, the 1st of next year. And, it's not enough, but it's important, whatever we can get. It would be a 3.9375% reduction in state sales tax. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. we have no more raised hands and no more questions in the Q&A box. So Jason, I'm going to throw it back to you.
All right, thank you, Aria, and thank you, Danielle and Eric. We're going to move on the agenda now. And so next up, we're going to have a few of our colleagues here who were kind enough to join us today from the California Energy Commission. And they'll be providing you with an update, with updates on several of their programs. And first up is Patrick Brecht with an update on the Clean Transportation Incentives Program. And now I'll turn it over to you, Patrick.
Thanks, Jason. You said my last name perfectly, by the way. Do you hear me? Obviously, okay, good. Just want to make sure people can hear me. Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Patrick Brecht, and I'm the project manager and the primary author of the CEC's Clean Transportation Program Investment Plan. And I'll provide a very brief update on the 2022 to 2023 investment plan update. That's the draft staff report version. And I'll focus, well, for today, on our medium and heavy duty investments. And my colleague Esther will discuss the blueprints for medium and heavy duty emission vehicle infrastructure. And that will be followed by Micah, who will talk about the medium and heavy duty electric vehicle infrastructure load operations deployment or heavy load model in collaboration with the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. So yeah, I'll just give you a little quick overview. The Clean Transportation Program was established by California Assembly Bill 118 in 2007, and the California Assembly Bill 8 extended the program to January 1st, 2024. The program is funded through a small surcharge on California vehicle registrations and provides up to $100 million per year. And after program administrative costs, it's usually about $95.2 million that we can use for funding. And as part of the Clean Transportation Program, the CEC prepares and adopts an annual investment plan update that identifies funding priorities for the coming fiscal year. Now, the CEC published the staff draft report version on Tuesday, and the first advisory committee meeting will take place on April 12th. That's next Tuesday. And after that, actually, it'll be a hybrid meeting, both in person and virtual attendees. After a lead commissioner level review of the comments for that advisory committee meeting and disadvantaged community advisory group consultations, plus docket submissions from stakeholders and the public in coordination with other state agencies like CARB or CPUC, we'll publish a revised draft probably at the end of June. Then a second advisory committee meeting, more likely about mid-July. And once again, a review of feedback. The commissioner report is then published and brought to the CEC business meeting for approval, currently set for mid-September. The approvals provide the plan's funding allocations for fiscal year 2022 to 2023 and signals the planned funding allocations for the subsequent half fiscal year, since it's a multi-year plan. And the key priorities or aspects of the staff draft combine both Clean Transportation Program funding and the general fund ZEV package investments from Budget Act of 2021. The funding allocations are, of course, focused on ZEV infrastructure, both battery electric and hydrogen fuel cells, and ZEV manufacturing. The proposed allocations, of course, reflect state goals for ZEVs, as well as near and long-term carbon reduction, improved air quality, and equity with a focus on providing benefits for disadvantaged communities. There's also coordination with state agencies through the Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Plan, or ZIP, and of course, the focus on equity, ensuring that our program investments benefit communities of color, disadvantaged communities, low-income communities, rural communities, tribal communities, and those living in multifamily housing. And we are seeking to provide more than 50% of our program funds from the investment plan towards projects that benefit low-income and disadvantaged communities. The allocations for the 2022 to 2023 investment plan update are unchanged from last year's 2021 to 2023 investment plan update. The purpose of the multi-year plan is to provide certainty to the market and to stakeholders with the opportunity to adjust funding allocations on an annual basis as needed. The plan update, as mentioned, combines both Clean Transportation Program funds and general fund ZEV package investments. And so the funding allocations for fiscal year 2022 to 2023, funding projections for the remainder of the Clean Clean Transportation Program, as well as the 1.165 billion over 3 years made through the ZEV package, as mentioned. To meet greenhouse gas and air quality goals, the sector, excuse me, the sector will need to transition zero emission technologies, and the resources required for this to be an equitable transition exceeds available funding. The CEC staff expects an increasing demand for dedicated charging and fueling infrastructure for medium and heavy duty ZEVs funded through the program and by other state agencies or other state incentive programs. As the state's lead agency for ZEV infrastructure deployment, the CEC will focus on infrastructure needs, both dedicated infrastructure and publicly accessible infrastructure of medium and heavy duty ZEVs. In addition, the CEC will seek ways to include grid integration, integrated storage solutions, and charging management as complementary technologies. The CEC is and will continue to coordinate closely with CARB. Our agencies are coordinating on multiple grant programs to provide a seamless experience for grantees wishing to invest in both ZEVs and infrastructure. And as you heard earlier from Amy of CalSTART, we will continue to provide funding through the Energized program to complement ZEV infrastructure with ZEV vehicles. Now, staff also considers land use, housing policies, data analysis from our AB 2127 report and SB 643, and sustainable community strategies as they relate to medium and heavy duty ZEV infrastructure investments. So for fiscal year 2022 to 2023, the CEC allocates 30.1 million in clean transportation program funding and 130 million in general funds dedicated to medium and heavy duty to meet the growing needs of charging and hydrogen fueling infrastructure for medium and heavy duty ZEVs, as well as demonstrate the state's commitment to improving air quality. And in accordance with Senate Bill 129 and pending legislative approval, this 130 million will be dedicated to the specific categories of drayage, transit, and school bus applications. That's it for me. I encourage everyone to participate either in person or through Zoom in the Clean Transportation Program Advisory Committee meeting on Tuesday. It's going to go from 9 to 1. It's actually at our old CEC building, or the Warren Allquest State Energy Building. So I encourage you to participate at that meeting. I will now turn it over to Esther.
Thanks, Patrick, and good morning, everyone. Hope you can hear me. My name is Esther Odifua, Energy Commission Specialist in the Freight and Transit Unit within the Fuels and Transportation Division at the California Energy Commission. And today I'll present a brief overview on the concepts for medium and heavy duty blueprint planning documents. And this is one of the concepts that was presented at the CEC February 28th workshop for medium duty, heavy duty. Now, this concept will be similar to the previously released grant funding opportunity, which was a competitive grant solicitation. And the medium duty, heavy duty blueprint solicitation provides funds for planning blueprints that will identify actions and milestones that are needed for implementation of medium and heavy duty zero emission vehicles. And of course, the related electric charging and or hydrogen refueling infrastructure, amongst other goals. This particular solicitation was open to all public and private entities, and eligible entities were required to have a role in the development, planning, permitting, or oversight of the planned medium duty, heavy duty ZEV and or ZEV infrastructure. Also, throughout the application process, applicants were encouraged to involve the local city or county government authorities, nonprofit entities, community-based organizations, environmental organizations, the local workforce, their development agencies, building developers, technology vendors, utilities, researchers, local community colleges, and the financiers. For this solicitation, 40 applicants were proposed for award across multiple California counties and vehicle sectors, and this totaled nearly $8 million. And this was, the funding was available to fund all the passing projects for that solicitation. Now, these medium duty, heavy duty blueprint projects are actually targeting completion beginning Q4 of this year. So we are going to be seeing some reports at the end of this year. And these projects are meant to be replicable across fleets, and they will seek to accelerate the deployment of medium duty, heavy duty ZEV and the ZEV infrastructure. And we all know that planning will continue to be important to all these fleets as they design or permit or finance and future-proof their infrastructure projects. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time. And I will now invite my colleague Micah to present on high-power charging corridor development, heavy load. I'm also available for any questions regarding the blueprint. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Esther. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So my name is Micah Wofford. I work in the Vehicle Grid Integration Unit at the California Energy Commission. And I am the staff project manager for the heavy load model. And I'm just going to provide a brief update on some of the aspects there. First of all, the modeling team has been reaching out to utility partners to gather feedback on the modeling approaches, inputs, and assumptions that we use to get information, and also get information on what kinds of data or analytical needs they may have. To that end, we've spoken with folks at the West Coast Clean Transit Corridor Initiative to assist with their grid readiness assessments and overall corridor electrification efforts. The team plans to follow up in the near future. That's for our collaboration there. In terms of modeling updates, we are deriving optimal infrastructure scenarios at a more granular level than the previous assessment last summer. We have some limited data to analyze characteristics at the site level, but we are targeting the traffic analysis zone, or TAZ, as the overall geospatial resolution for the modeling output. And so then I'll get into 3 of our main targeted updates that I want to talk about today. So first is the smart charging assessment. We're exploring parking flexibility options at the site level based on real-time energy demand. This is currently being tested on different scenarios using data from the California statewide travel demand model to assess how altering parking duration could affect charging behavior. When combined with other site constraints such as pricing, available capacity, etc., different scenarios can be created to evaluate their trade-offs. And so we're looking for more data in this space to inform parking behaviors and to infer how to treat these types of situations. But at this point, the data are very limited. Next is the dynamic pricing module. We've also been looking at how dynamic and commercial pricing affects charging behavior by implementing different test schemes for energy pricing. This is still in the very early phase of development, but will be an important piece of the puzzle when paired with other site constraints to assess the overall picture of site level behavior. And then finally, for the last update is the distribution feeder circuit capacity analysis. So the team has been comparing available circuit capacity. Sorry, I lost my notes here. The team has been comparing available feeder circuit capacity with peak charging load at the site level determined by the model. We first did this study for drayage trucks, but we are currently working to expand to all vehicle applications and also at the statewide level. The first look did not include smart charging or dynamic pricing as described above, but the overall goal is to tie all of these aspects together to create a robust set of charging scenarios. That's all I have for an update on heavy load, and happy to take any questions, but I'll pass it back over to CARB staff, I think, since this is the end of our CEC updates. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Micah. And thank you, Patrick and Esther. Really appreciate those updates. So now we're going to open up again for questions and comments, and I'll turn it back to Aria for that.
Thank you, Jason. I'm going to take the one question we have in the Q&A box from Rajit. Is there a PowerPoint presentation being used? If so, it's not visible. There is no PowerPoint presentation being used, but for the CEC presentation. But just as a reminder, this work group is being recorded and will be posted to our website in about 2 weeks. That being said, we do have a raised hand from Ray Pingle. Ray, I have unmuted your mic.
Great, thanks. This is Ray Pingle from Sierra Club, California. And this is a comment I have for Patrick. First of all, Patrick, I've read almost the whole report and it's really excellent. You've done an excellent job at that. And I have to say, when you read this report, when anyone reads this report, it starts out with a summary of all the things the Energy Commission has done to advance our transition to zero emission transportation. And it's phenomenal. It's just extraordinary. So my hat's really off to the entire CEC team for what you've done. The one comment I have, the thing that gives me the most angst that's in the report is the expected the projected number of cars and chargers by 2025. The mobile source strategy called for about 3 million cars on the road by 2025, whereas Governor Brown's older executive order called for 1.5. And that's the number that's used in this report. Governor Newsom's executive order 79-20 I forgot 7 anyway. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Supersedes the prior executive order. It even says it does. It says that in order to meet these more ambitious goals that I'm calling for, the CEC should upgrade its infrastructure requirements accordingly to achieve those goals. And if we look at what's actually happening on the ground, we know that we surpassed 1 million EVs on the road last year in California. We added 250,000 last year. Even if you just assume we go at that same rate this year and next year, we'll be at 1.5 million cars at the latest by the end of next year, probably by summer of next year. And so that car number is what drives the infrastructure number. So in the report, it says that we need 250,000 chargers by 2025. And that's going to be woefully inadequate, given what's actually happening in our state with the rapid adoption of vehicles. And in the AB 2127 report, in Appendix C, it says that in 2025, if we're supporting infrastructure for 3 million cars, we need about 400,000 chargers, not 250,000 chargers. So I really think this is a significant issue. The last thing we want to do is be short of infrastructure that discourages people from transitioning to EVs. And really recommend that y'all take a look at that and changing that and looking to potentially even adjust the investment plan to reallocate more resources to charging infrastructure for electric vehicles in the short term, or we'll have a real problem. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ray, for your comment. I don't want to get ahead of our advisory committee meeting, so I would really recommend, Ray, that you attend our meeting next Tuesday and submit comments to our docket. That's 2022-ALT-01. And you'll have an audience of the Lead Commissioner on Transportation, along with AB 2127 staff, who may be able to answer your questions or give the reasoning for your inquiry. So that's probably where I have to leave it there with you, Ray.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ray. So I do want to address some of the questions or comments in the Q&A box. Elizabeth Stein has asked if could someone share a link to the documents being discussed, including the report. I'd like to read it, but I can't seem to locate it. Thanks. It looks like Elizabeth John has posted a link to the 2022-2023 investment plan update for the Clean Transportation Program. So those are the two, and then James Frey also asked for the same report. And then Steve Brink from the California Forestry Association, off-road equipment application window. I looked on your website and to find the latest application process, and the latest one that's shown is 2019, but he doubts that that's the latest. Can anyone comment on this?
I believe he's talking about the Clean Off-Road program. And yes, that's the latest that's currently posted on the website. So take a look at that application. We are currently going through amendments to that, which the updated implementation manual will be released here in the next several weeks. But it will be very, very similar to what you see on the website currently. So stay tuned for the most updated. But take a look at that to get a head start on the requirements for the application.
Thank you, Jacob. And he also says thank you. There are no more questions in the Q&A. Oh, Leslie Goodbody has a not a question, but a comment for detailed discussions with utilities and fleets on electricity and the grid and the ties to fleet electrification. Check out the recordings for the January 12th and March 10th, 2022 ZEV infrastructure workgroup meetings led by CARB in collaboration with CEC, CPUC, and GoBez. I am going to, now that'll be, you can see the links to those meetings in the answered section of the Q&A box. It does not look like we have any more raised hands, and there are no more questions in the Q&A box, Jason.
All right, thank you, Aria. And thank you again, Patrick, Esther, and Micah. Really appreciate your updates today. I am going to, before I get, post my contact information in the chat box, as well as a link to our low carbon transportation and AQUIP webpage, where we list all of our upcoming meetings. And that is where you can find out what's coming up, as well as links to previous meetings and attachments and information from those meetings. So before we close today's work group meeting, I just want to note again upcoming events and milestones. First of all, just to ensure that we have time to incorporate any input from today's session, if you do plan to provide us with any further written comments or feedback, we would just ask that you provide that in the next couple of weeks. As far as anything presented today, we will have another work group meeting on May 25th, where we'll be providing some additional updates on the heavy duty investment strategy. We did again have our initial funding plan workshop on March 15th, and the next one is scheduled right now tentatively for July 21st. Expecting to have a draft funding plan released in early July. And then the final draft funding plan, again, we expect to have that out for review in early October, with the plan to go to our board in November, probably the 17th or 18th of November would be the time frame for that. And again, other heavy duty work groups that are tentatively scheduled to come up. May 3rd, we have a core work group in the morning and an HVIP work group planned for the afternoon. May 4th, again, the truck loans and the new zero emission loan pilot program on SB 372. And then May 10th, another core work group meeting focused on implementation. And just note that some of these dates may still change, but we'll continue to update those on our webpage, as well as keep you updated through email updates through GovDelivery. So before I close the meeting, I would just ask if any of our panelists today have anything else they want to add. And it looks like we may also have another raised hand, but anything else from the panel today, any of our panelists that they want to add? Okay, if not, then I'm going to ask Aria to again queue up questions and comments here.
Thank you, Jason. Nico has his hand raised. Nico, I have unmuted your mic.
Good morning, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I called in late, so let's start there. So apologies if this question is has already been asked and addressed. But in the context of these upcoming meetings and in the context of what HVIP has allowed CARB to fund and to allow industry to move forward on, will the future meetings include the effect of the HVIP funding in this what the effect of this funding is on the plans moving forward, such as Beachhead Strategy, technology status snapshots, etc., and market readiness, because of the large number of trucks that's expected to come on the road because of that effort.
Thanks, Nico. Yes, what's happening with HVIP will certainly inform what goes into the heavy duty investment strategy. The investment strategy does look out, not so much in the current year that we're addressing in the funding plan, but more in the 3 years after that. But certainly what we're seeing right now is going to definitely be reflected in what we put in the investment strategy moving forward. So things that we're seeing now will certainly show up in the updates that we do in our 3-year priorities, as well as the beachheads and the tech snapshots. But I don't know, Andrea, if you have anything else to add to that, but I think that's generally how we see HVIP and core and the demonstration pilot projects. They will certainly be reflected in the strategy going forward.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Jason. And Nico, I'll note too that we do have a work group planned for May 3rd for HVIP to talk a little bit more in detail about what exactly we saw come out of the most recent reopening and really the historic investments there. So we hope you're able to join then. That'll of course be a start of the conversation, and we'll continue to use the outcomes to inform the investment strategy, as Jason mentioned.
Yeah, and really why I was asking as well is because my rough calculation on, for example, drayage was that there are over 600 trucks rolling out in, say, in a year and a half or so, and that really will change in alignment with your 1,000 truck goal on the heavy duty side of things for drayage. It may change the conversation significantly, and May 3rd may be a good time to start a little bit about that, but I suspect it has an influence on your 3 years ahead investment strategy as well. That's why I was really asking, because it raises a lot of infrastructure as well as practical questions as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Nico.
Thank you, Nico. We do have a question from Dave Cook in the Q&A box. Did I miss the 3-year priority table?
Dave, no, you did not miss the table. We have not put together an updated table for this year yet. We're just starting to talk about it. We're just putting together some ideas. So at this point, if you have any thoughts on what you'd like to see in this year's update, please let us know. Otherwise, take a look at the table in last year's heavy duty investment strategy to see what we had there. And if you see that there's anything that should be updated or added to that, just let us know. Either you can contact me directly or through these work group meetings through this process.
Thank you, Jason. And then we have another question in the Q&A box from Ami. I apologize if this was already discussed. Is there going to be any discussion or consideration around near zero emission vehicles?
I think we discussed this earlier when we talked about the updates to the beachheads. We certainly incorporate near zero emission. We look at that as things that are zero emission enabling or that meet the new optional low NOx standard. And so that's part of our strategy, and that will be included as we discussed earlier going forward.
Thank you, Jason. We have a few more raised hands. First up is Mark Roost. Mark, I have unmuted your mic.
Thank you. This is Mark Roost, R-O-E-S-T, with Sustainable Energy, Inc. and the Silicon Valley Clean Cities Coalition as an advisor. And the question has to do, I just heard the previous questioner ask about 600 drayage trucks in the next year and a half. And I have not seen a published written update to the CARB mandate that all the 2009 and earlier engine model year trucks will be prohibited from entering the ports and probably from registering as well after the end of this year. So I haven't seen a correction to that. That's blatantly, glaringly contradictory to what the guy just said, and I didn't hear any reactions from you guys. So please explain exactly where we are and when things are going to change for drayage for trucks and ports, and to what extent.
All right, thanks for that question, Mark. I'm not sure I can address that right on the spot here, but that's certainly something we can get back to you on as far as where we are with the current status of the zero emission trucks, as well as what's going on with the ports and what is allowed to operate in the ports. We can certainly report back on that later.
Yeah, I've been putting together plans for dealing with that, but I feel like I'm being, thrown for a loop by not really knowing what's going on. So yeah, I would like a feedback.
Okay, yeah, we can report back on that later.
Okay, you have an idea when I would see that?
I'll coordinate internally and see what I can find out, and certainly feel free to reach out to me directly, and we can chat offline, and I can let you know.
I'm sorry, what's your email address?
I put it in the chat, but it's jason.crow@arb.ca.gov.
All right, thank you, Jason.
Sure.
Bye.
Next up, excuse me. Next up, we have Jamie Levin. Jamie, I've unmuted your mic.
Thank you. Jamie Levin with the Center for Transportation and the Environment. In years past, the Energy Commission would allocate some of its funding for the purposes of prototype development. I spoke earlier about efficiency improvements and the need to address certain applications such as fuel cell coaches or zero emission coaches. So I'm wondering if that still is in, clearly the Energy Commission has to focus on infrastructure. That is really our critical path as we transition to zero emission. But is there any thought within the Energy Commission to funding prototype development, or is that now being looked at as something only CARB would do, which is typically funded under HVIP, commercially available vehicles, or under pilot projects as such? I realize this is probably a very good question to raise before next week's meeting with the advisory board and Patty Monahan, which I will raise that, although I have some conflicts with some other meetings. But if there is a response from Esther or Patrick, I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts today.
Thank you for that, Jamie Levin. And I will also let Patrick talk about that. But again, we did have a workshop on February 28th where we proposed several concepts, and we also encouraged participants to actually submit their comments to the docket. And I believe those comments were due, and we are currently reviewing all those comments. And of course, in developing all these future solicitations, we will be looking at all these suggestions to see where we should be focusing on. And I know Patrick will also talk about that in the advisory committee. So yeah, good point.
Thanks, Esther. We did submit to the docket a letter that covered a number of subjects with respect to your investment plan.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Yeah, I do look forward to, hopefully you can participate next Tuesday. And if you can't, with your conflict, yeah, submit to our advisory committee document, or excuse me, our investment plan docket. And we'd really like to hear your comments or see your comments, and they'll be discussed all the way through Patty, and we'll get answers to you.
Great, great. Just so both you and CARB realize the number of workshops is infinite, and it's a challenge to schedule one's time with all the other work going on, which is actually deploying many of these vehicles. But absolutely appreciate and respect the work both CEC and CARB are doing to get input, but scheduling is a challenge.
Yeah, we certainly understand that, but we only have 2 advisory committee meetings a year. So anyway.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. And as much as possible, we do try to coordinate and bring together folks like we did today for these meetings. and we'll try to keep doing that. Try to be as respectful of everyone's time as we can.
Thank you. We don't have any more raised hands, and there are no questions in the Q&A box.
Great, thank you, Aria. Well, then once again, I'd like to thank our panelists today for joining us from the California Energy Commission, from CalSTART, as well as my colleagues here at CARB for making this a successful work group meeting. And so I appreciate all of your time and information shared today. Again, we will have additional meetings as we discussed earlier, and we appreciate everyone's feedback today and look forward to meeting with you again. And so thank you again for participating in today's work group meeting, and you get to enjoy a little bit more of your time today. Have a great day, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you.